When you spend for long hours driving across state lines to celebrate family, the last thing you expect is to be treated like an embarrassing secret. My husband Caleb and I had brought our 2 young children, Chloe and Toby, all the way to Connecticut for my brother Travis's big engagement party. We were dressed modestly but neatly, completely unaware that our presence was about to trigger an unbelievable wave of snobbery, arrogance, and a jaw-dropping twist that no one in that mansion saw coming. We pulled up the winding driveway shortly after 7, staring at a massive estate glowing under bright chandeliers. Luxury sports cars filled the driveway, making our 8-year-old station wagon look like it belonged to the service crew. My son Toby stared out the window with wide eyes, assuming his uncle lived like a movie star. I softly reminded him that Travis was only renting the mansion. Caleb stayed quiet beside me, but I recognized the sharp, calculating look in his eyes that usually meant he was studying every detail. Walking onto the back terrace felt like stepping onto a runway for the ridiculously wealthy. Guests in tailored suits and haute couture dripped with expensive jewelry and drank fine champagne. Chloe held my hand tightly, her small fingers slightly damp from anxiety. She was 9 and far too smart not to notice the intense, judging stares coming from every direction. I whispered a quick word of encouragement, trying to mask my own growing discomfort as a cold event coordinator checked off our names on her clipboard with noticeable hesitation. Instead of guiding us toward my brother, the coordinator escorted us past the glowing VIP lounge where Travis was holding court in a $3,000 suit. Travis made eye contact with me for a fraction of a second, but there was no warm smile or eager wave. His face flushed with pure embarrassment before he quickly turned his back on us. We were marched past all the main tables and forced into a dark corner right next to the noisy swinging doors of the kitchen. Our designated table was dim, bathed in fluorescent spillover light, and smelled of dirty dishes and harsh soap. Chloe quietly asked why we were sitting by the kitchen, forcing me to swallow my pride and pretend everything was fine. Across the grand patio, Travis laughed with his rich friends, completely ignoring our corner. Caleb remained calm, leaning back in his chair with a slow, deliberate rhythm, but I knew my husband better than anyone. Beneath his quiet surface, he was taking notes, and those notes always came with serious consequences. Soon after, Travis's fiancée, a polished 28-year-old named Victoria, glided toward our lonely table. She wore a sparkling gown and carried an artificial smile that barely concealed her condescension. She made a theatrical show of feeling sorry for our long commute from rural life, dropping backhanded compliments about my work in the public sector. Caleb smoothly chimed in to defend my work, reminding her that managing massive budgets required immense skill, but Victoria simply dismissed his comments with a light, patronizing laugh. Victoria then turned her attention to my son Toby, who was eyeing the gourmet appetizers floating past on silver trays. She quickly crouched down and warned him that delicacies like caviar and pate were far too advanced for his unrefined palate. In front of nearby guests, she offered to have the kitchen whip up some basic fast food or fried chicken that our family was more accustomed to eating. I immediately stood up and refused her insulting offer, declaring that my children were perfectly capable of trying new things. The situation spiraled out of control a short while later when Chloe returned from the restroom in tears. She sat down, trembling, and confessed that a group of older kids had mocked her vintage leather flats, calling them charity bin junk. Victoria reappeared instantly, not to comfort my daughter, but to lecture me about raising children in isolation without proper social standards. She openly suggested that our rustic appearance was making the wealthy guests uncomfortable, blaming me for bringing underdressed children to a high-class event. I was shaking with anger, caught between defending my young daughter and avoiding a massive scene at my brother's celebration. Victoria stood over us with a smug, victorious grin, convinced she had put us in our place. But then Caleb stood up. The easygoing, gentle tone he had maintained all evening vanished instantly. The atmosphere around our table turned icy cold as Caleb adjusted his jacket, his calm blue eyes looking at me with a silent question he had asked many times before during critical moments. He was asking if I had finally reached my limit, and I gave him a subtle, decisive nod. I called for the kids to grab their things, choosing our dignity over my brother's cruel social ambitions. Victoria smirked, projecting her voice so the surrounding crowd could hear, claiming it was best for us to leave her private house so she could maintain her standards. She paraded her authority, loudly reminding everyone that it was her family property and we simply did not fit into their elevated world. Before we could take 3 steps, the grand glass doors opened and 2 stern men in tailored charcoal suits entered the terrace. They ignored the security guards, walked straight past the wealthy crowd, and approached Caleb with absolute respect. Handing over an official leather folder, the lead officer announced that the current lease on the mansion had been officially revoked effective immediately due to contract violations and unauthorized commercial events. The entire patio went completely silent as guests gasped in total disbelief. Victoria turned pale, stammering that her father owned the property through his firm. Caleb spoke up, his calm voice echoing clearly across the patio, revealing that her father had defaulted on the primary mortgage months ago. Caleb explained that his investment trust had quietly purchased the entire estate just last week. He looked Victoria directly in the eyes and informed her that while he did not rent properties, as of 20 minutes ago, neither did she. Travis stood paralyzed in the crowd, his face completely drained of color. We walked away from the chaos, leaving behind the ruined party and the crumbling pride of people who valued status over family. As we reached our station wagon in the cool night air, Chloe looked up at me and quietly mentioned how much she loved her shoes. I smiled down at her, holding her hand tightly, knowing that true value is built on character, integrity, and things that are made to last.